Welcome to the Triangle Center for Spiritual Living. So glad that you have joined us this morning, and also welcome to those of you who have invited us into your homes this morning through the technology of live streaming. Thank you so very much. Is there anyone that's here for the very, very first time? I don't think so. She's teasing. She's absolutely teasing. So you all know who I am, and I don't have to go through all that.
Today's reading is a metaphysical interpretation of one of the most beloved Bible verses, the 23rd Psalm. This interpretation is by Charles Fillmore. So I would invite you to just close your eyes and let it sink in. God is the source of my peace, unending and ever present. I am filled with calm and clarity. I choose my highest good, my greatest glory, for God and I are one. Even when I forget our oneness, God does not desert me. The awesome power of God comforts me, protects me, and reminds me of our unity. Even in the midst of fear, doubt, and worry, I am reminded of the presence of God as my source and the peace that passes all understanding. Within God's everlasting love, I live in the overflow of life. God lives in me, through me, and as me forever and ever. My life is now an expression of goodness, joy, peace, and unconditional love. And my gratitude is full, complete, and eternal. And so it is.
Welcome to those of you who may have just arrived in the sanctuary. The theme for the month of April is transformation and evolution, and my talk title today is Find Your Transformation. Did you all know today is Palm Sunday? Yeah. Now, I think that this day represents our willingness to find and then to step into our transformation. The events of Palm Sunday speak to listening to our still small voice, that voice that is always seeking to be expressed through and as us. The one that speaks to us about who we need to be and what we need to do in order to transform, in order to evolve into our highest and best. The events of the day speak to knowing who we are beyond a shadow of a doubt and standing firmly grounded in our faith and being willing to turn away from the world of form and do that which we are meant to do. The events of the day invite us to step out in faith, not faith in something outside of ourselves, but faith in the power and presence of God within us. Faith in the creative power of the law. Faith in a universe that is always for us and never against us. The events of the day speak to us about moving through our fears and letting go of any resistance that we may have to our own transformation. Now, I know that we have talked about Palm Sunday here before, but for me, there is no other story that can quite relate what this story can relate. We believe here at the Triangle Center for Spiritual Living that Jesus is a master teacher, speaking to us not only in parables and stories, but speaking to us through the way that he lived his life. Now, through the events of Palm Sunday, Jesus shows us the truth about who we have to be and what we have to do to transform our lives and not simply move about and rearrange the external circumstances hoping for a different outcome. Now, for those of you that grew up in a religious vacuum, such as I did, I will take just a moment to look at the historical events of that day. Now, on that Sunday, probably about the year 30, Jesus entered into the city of Jerusalem. John Stackhouse, in an article on Palm Sunday, writes, "He was just one of thousands of pilgrims streaming into the city to celebrate Passover, one of the great annual feasts of the Jewish calendar." But the truth was, he was not just one of many. The crowds around Jesus had been so impressed with the wonders that he had worked and the sermons that he had preached that they were hoping that he was the promised Messiah who would establish a new kingdom of peace and prosperity. They celebrated him by cutting down palm branches and spreading them on the road to soften the path for the donkey that Jesus rode into town upon, while others simply waved the palm branches and shouted their praises. Now, culturally at the time, this was a show of great respect. Less than a week later, however, these same crowds would call for the death of Jesus. John Stackhouse goes on to write, "He was a great disappointment, a failure really, who inflamed people's expectations and then did nothing to fulfill them. There is nothing that arouses fury more than dashed hopes." Now, after his arrival, either immediately that day or the next day, depending upon which account you are reading, Jesus cleansed the temple of Jerusalem by violently driving out the money changers and other merchants of the temple commerce. The act resulted in the temple authorities seeking to arrest Jesus as a threat to public order and as a danger to the peace between the Jews and Rome. Now, they succeeded in bribing his disciple Judas into betraying him, and were able to finally arrest him in the Garden of Gethsemane, leading to his trial by Pontius Pilate and his crucifixion as a traitor to Rome. Now, whether you believe that these are literal historic events, purely symbolic, or somewhere in between, if you are here today, then in all probability you realize that the events of this day recount an interior experience, or at the very least you're willing to hear about that possibility. Now, metaphysically, Jerusalem represents the abiding consciousness of peace within us. And Jesus represents the Christ consciousness within each and every single one of us. Now, the events in the marketplace when Jesus overturned the money changers' table and violently drove them out of the temple represent the cleansing of our body, mind, and soul of old habit patterns, of negative thoughts, and of unconscious intentions. It is ridding ourselves of old tapes and obsolete beliefs that no longer serve us, which lead to inner transformation and to the possibility of us stepping into our higher selves, our Christ consciousness. It's a turning away. It is a turning away from our human perceptions and from our attachments to our human perceptions, those perceptions that we receive from our senses, and instead embracing a deeper, more spiritually mature and aware way to live our lives. Now, booting out the money changers is merely a shift in our consciousness, an expansion of our awareness of what is important to us, and an ability to bring it all together and into alignment. Now, last week we talked about the difference between change and transformation. We said that typically change involves simply looking at the outer circumstances of our lives and rearranging some aspect of it, such as getting a new job in order to experience more happiness, or leaving a relationship in order to experience more peace. Now, what we talked about was that this is first order change. And Marty Lefko, who wrote this article called "What is the Difference Between Change and Transformation?" says that this first order change is a type of change that never lasts. It's a type of change that is never complete. It's a type of change that will never fulfill the underlying desires that we have, because it is a kind of change that does not ask us to look at our current worldview. It does not ask us to look at our existing beliefs, and it does not ask us to think about who we are in the matter. All that it does is simply rearranging the external aspects of our lives. And what he is saying is that first order change may not bring about the changes that you want. It may not bring about the underlying feeling that you wish to have. So simply changing your job may not bring you happiness. Leaving a relationship may not bring you the peace that you want to experience. First order change does not require that we change what we are creating from. It does not require us to change our context. And if we do not change what we are creating from, if we do not change our context, then we will continue to create the same experiences over and over and over again. To find our transformation, to experience it within our lives, we have to look within. We have to be willing to move into what Marty Lefko called second order change. We have to be willing to look at our underlying worldview. We have to be willing to look at the conscious and unconscious already existing beliefs that we have. We have to be willing to look at who we are in the matter. We have to be willing to do the personal work of self-discovery to reveal the inner divinity. We have to be willing to transform from the inside out. We have to be willing to go back to the innocence that is the truth of who we are, letting go of anything that is no longer serving us. Now, when Jesus rode into Jerusalem that day, he rode in on a colt of a donkey. Being a colt, it had never been ridden. Never being ridden means that it had never been used for any worldly or secular use. It therefore represents the innocence that we arrived on the planet with and as. It had never been subjected to the thoughts, ideas, and beliefs of race consciousness. Miguel Ruiz would say that it had never been domesticated. It knows only its divine inheritance. Now, speaking of divine inheritance, another metaphysical idea around Palm Sunday is that the temple itself represents oneness, a deep and abiding connection and communion with God, while the money changers represent a belief in separation. In a perfect world, communion and oneness would be the only thing, the only purpose within the temple, the only thing going on. And the invitation is that that should be the only thing going on within our hearts and within our minds and within our lives. Regina Dawn Akers, in the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament, writes, "In this way you are like the temple and the money changers. Your truth is like the symbol of the temple. Your only purpose is oneness and communion. But you have allowed a foreign purpose to reside within your mind, and by focusing on that foreign purpose, your true purpose has become lost to you." So that foreign purpose is the belief in separation and our outward expression of that. Our only true purpose is oneness, or our remembrance of that truth and the outward expression of the peace, the joy, the love, the wisdom, the creativity, and the abundance that is at our very core. More than anyone in history, I believe that Jesus stood in his oneness. In his oneness, no matter what experiences he was going through at the time. He turned away from the crowds, turned away from what they wanted him to do, and did instead what he knew was best for him to do. "I and the Father are one," he said. Of that he had absolutely no doubt. Jesus stood firmly grounded in his faith and in his willingness to allow the will of God to come about in whatever way divine wisdom was considered to be the best and the highest for all. Jesus knew that failing to fulfill the prophecies would be to be too attached to his own will, to his own ideas, or swayed by the ideas and the expectations of others. He instead chose to listen to his intuition, to that still small voice within him. He surrendered to it. That surrender was an act of the most unbelievable faith that we could ever imagine. Because on that day, according to the Bible, when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on that colt, he knew that he was going to die on Friday. He did not flinch. He did not turn around. He surrendered his fears and his doubts and his worries to God, and he did it anyway. He did it anyway. For us to do this, we have to first remember who and what we are, spiritual beings having a human experience. Created by God and out of God in God's image and likeness. We need to recognize our true self and be willing to let go of our fears, doubts, and worries. We must let go of our expectations and the expectations that others have of us. Put aside every concept of meaning that we have ever made up about our circumstances. Just simply put it aside. We have to do this in order to be open to all that we have never even imagined. To be open to the allness of possibility, the infinite potential that is who we are at our very core. We have to do this in order to express the goodness that is seeking to be expressed through us. that only we can express in our own unique and individualized way. No one else can express it exactly like we can. We have to do this in order to transform. It's saying yes to the Christ consciousness that is within us. And when we do that, when we have a full body, powerful yes to the Christ consciousness within us, anything and everything is possible. Ernest Holmes says, fearlessly announce that you are the truth and nothing but the truth. Know that within you dwells the eternal God, for all the presence, all the power, and all the God there is within you and in you now. Right now. This isn't always easy. Perhaps we find it easier to simply go with the crowd, or to stay stuck in the known simply because it's familiar, maybe feels a little less scary. Often we do not listen to that still small voice of vision and instead end up being pushed by pain. Many of us hear the voice and rebel because we don't like being told what to do. We often question what we thought we heard, believing that, oh, no, that can't be so. That can't be true. I'm hearing things. Because that can't be attainable. And the reason we think it can't be attainable is that we are seeing through our human eyes that do not see rightly. So we can't see how to get there from where we are right now. But that doesn't mean that it can't be done. We've tried a whole lot of other things, right? Oftentimes we fall back into old habit patterns, literally falling back asleep like the disciples did in the garden. Often we second guess ourselves. We get all caught up in the how. Or we tend to unearth the seeds that we have just planted. Just making sure. Now, what we believe in Science of Mind is that resistance is just a reflection of the resistance that we have within us. A reflection, just a reflection. In an article by Dr. Suzanne Freeborn, she states, if you know how the law of mind works and you resist it, the law continues to work, and it will mirror back to you your resistance. There is a law in the universe, and you can use it. This will not change. That's why they call it a law. It is you and the use that you put the law to that has to change. In other words, you have to surrender to the way that it works. The bottom line is that if we want our lives to change, if we want to transform, if we want to be all that we were created to be, we have to change our minds. We have to work within our own consciousness to transform our outer experiences. We have to do the inner work of inquiry, the inner work of forgiveness, the inner work of gratitude, and the inner work of prayer. It is the only way that it works. We have to stand in our divinity. Without question, without doubt, the kingdom of God is within us. The power of God is within us. And because of that, we can do great things. Great things. This divine power gives creative authority to our thoughts and beliefs. This divine power gives us authority to transform our lives. Ernest Holmes says, and I love this one, the greatest adventure in life would be an experiment with ourselves to see what we could do with this thing that is within us. It is an experiment in self-discovery, and this self-discovery will lead to changes in your consciousness. And I add that these changes in our consciousness will lead to our transformation. And ultimately, one person at a time, to the transformation of the entire world. We are here on the planet for a reason. And I believe that it is a mighty purpose. We're not here to play small. We're not here to be less than all that we were created to be. When we know who and whose we are able to find a way to rewrite the stories that we've told ourselves about our lives in a way that sets the stage for transformation, in a way that is not in resistance to our transformation, but actually empowers it from within. When we know who and what we are able to create the experiences of our lives from a blank slate of innocence, from the unlimited possibility that is the truth of our being. From that space, we will find our transformation right where it has always been, within us. From that space, we can stand in an inner acceptance of our power, an inner acceptance of our power to transform, and to choose to not allow outer circumstances to affect our ability to stay centered in our peace, to stay connected to God. From that space, we have all that we would ever need within us to transform and to evolve. Now today, on Palm Sunday, I invite you to ask yourself, am I willing to remember each and every moment of every day who I am? Am I willing to humbly do that which is mine to do? Am I willing to let go of my fears, doubts, and worries and stand firmly grounded in my inner peace? Am I willing to let go of resistance, negative thoughts, and second guessing? Am I willing to turn away from old patterns and expectations, my own or everybody else's, and allow that which is trying, which is seeking, which is trying, which is wanting to be expressed through me to do so? Am I willing to find my transformation and powerfully bring it forward, healing my own life and ultimately the entire world? If you are willing, please repeat after me. Yes, I am willing. Yes, I am willing.
Yes, I am willing.
One more time. Yes, I am willing. And so it is. So I invite you to turn within, to anchor this message in a moment of prayer. And as I close my outer eyes, I am acutely aware of the power and presence of God that is within me and surrounding me. I know that it is the very essence of peace and joy, creativity, wisdom and abundance. I know that it created me out of itself. That right where I am, God is in its fullness, in its wholeness. That it could be no other way. And just as I know that this is true for me, I know that it is true for each and every person here this morning. That each of us is a hologram of God. imbued with the allness of God, the fullness of God. Each of us is a unique and divine expression of the divine. And it is from that place of unity, of oneness, this deep and abiding connection and communion with God that can never be broken. I speak these words about and for each of us this morning, truly knowing that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, that within us is everything that we need to live a life that we love to live. Within us is everything that we need to fuel our transformation from the inside out. That truly our desires for ourselves are God's desires for us. And that it is ready, willing, and able to co-create with us. And so by the power of my voice, I call forward ease and grace. Ease and grace into stepping into not only finding our transformation, but stepping into it in a powerful way. Letting go of any resistance, letting go of old tapes, letting go of obsolete beliefs that no longer serve us. And instead, remembering who we are at any given moment. I claim for each of us that there is a way that we can live our life that is not simply moving around the external circumstances and hoping for something better, but a way that we can live our lives from creation, from innocence, from love, from peace, from joy, by simply getting into alignment with the source of all that there is. And I'm so grateful to know this truth, so grateful to speak these words, so grateful for the power of prayer, knowing that these words are loosed into a law that only ever says yes, that they are clothed in form even as they are spoken. And so I speak them and release them with love and gratitude and full expectation of their manifestation, letting go and letting God be God. And I invite each of us to anchor them for ourselves and for each other simply by saying, and so it is. Amen. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.